Right now, at this very moment, you are feeling anxious. It is not the loud, obvious kind of panic that makes your chest heave or your hands shake uncontrollably. It is the quiet kind. The kind that sits silently behind your ribs like it naturally belongs there, acting as a constant, heavy companion in your daily life. You close your eyes at night, hoping for just a few hours of peace, and suddenly your mind starts racing for absolutely no logical reason. You reach out in the dark, illuminate the screen, and check the time. It is 2:47 a.m. Again, you let out a deep sigh and try to convince yourself that it is just normal stress. You tell yourself that everybody feels this way, that it is just the price of being an adult in the modern world. But what if I told you that this is not normal at all? What if the anxiety you feel every single day isn't random, and it certainly isn't your fault? This constant, low-grade anxiety is not a bug in your system. It is a feature. Your brain is currently running ancient, primitive survival software in a world that has completely rewritten all the rules of existence. For 300,000 years, this exact same anxiety was humanity's greatest gift. It kept your ancestors alive in a brutal, unforgiving wilderness. It made them hypervigilant to predators and threats. Today, however, that same delicate alarm system is being triggered by invisible, modern forces 24 hours a day, and you never, ever get the all-clear signal to finally relax. Most people genuinely believe they understand exactly why they are feeling so anxious all the time. When asked, they will immediately point fingers at the most obvious culprits. They blame their demanding job and their unreasonable boss. They blame their phone that never stops ringing. They blame the endless, depressing cycle of the 24-hour news network. They blame the fragile economy, the rising cost of living, and the uncertain future. And yes, absolutely, those things matter deeply, but they're only the surface level of a much deeper, much darker ocean. The real reasons for your constant state of panic, they are entirely hidden from plain sight. They are buried deep within the fundamental design of everything around you, engineered into the architecture of modern society. And until you learn to see them clearly, you will spend your entire life treating the symptoms while the underlying disease only gets stronger. Consider this. Harvard researchers spent 10 years tracking the cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone, in thousands of perfectly ordinary people. What they discovered completely shocked the scientific community. They proved that anxiety isn't exploding because human life has gotten objectively harder. In almost every measurable way, we are physically safer, better fed, and richer than any other generation in the history of the world. The explosion of anxiety is happening because our modern, highly industrialized environment is systematically attacking our nervous system from completely new angles. Angles that millions of years of human evolution simply never prepared us to defend against. Researchers at MIT's Media Lab began looking closely at our digital behavior studies, trying to understand how our devices impact our mental health. What they found perfectly mirrored the terrifying biological data coming from the medical community. They discovered a dark, undeniable correlation. The more digitally connected we become as a society, the more profoundly anxious, isolated, and terrified we feel on an individual level. And this is not happening despite our unprecedented global connection. It is happening because of it. Here is the hidden, uncomfortable truth that tech billionaires and social media giants absolutely refuse to say out loud. Your anxiety is not a personal failing, and it is certainly not a clinical disorder. It is a perfectly logical, biologically appropriate response to a world that was never, ever built for your delicate nervous system. You are living in a highly optimized world that literally profits when you stay in a permanent state of slight unease. Think about the mechanics of the digital economy. Corporations make billions of dollars when you scroll just a little bit longer out of fear of missing out. Brands thrive when you buy just one more unnecessary product to artificially soothe your nerves and system wins when you stay quiet, compliant, and continuously distracted by your own internal panic. This is the viral moment of our generation. This is the crucial missing piece they never teach you in school, and it changes absolutely everything once you finally open your eyes to it. But here is where the story gets even stranger and more revealing. Imagine a real, scientifically documented experiment conducted at a major university. Scientists took 120 young, healthy adults who described themselves as anxious but functioning. These were completely normal people, just like you, navigating the daily grind. For 10 consecutive days, the researchers took away their smartphones and handed them basic dumb phones. There was no internet, no addictive apps, no social media feeds, and no constant news alerts. Just standard phone calls and basic text messages. The first 3 days of this digital detox were described as absolutely brutal. Participants experienced intense irritability, physical restlessness, and the knot in their stomachs grew tighter than ever. They felt entirely cut off from the world. But by day 5, something miraculous shifted in their biology. Their sleep dramatically improved. Their deep focus returned. That constant, exhausting, low-level dread faded away completely. By day 10, many stated they felt like entirely different human beings, calmer, more present, and deeply connected to themselves. Then, the smartphones were handed back. Within just 48 hours, the crippling anxiety roared back to life. Not because of any specific negative message, but simply because of the mere possibility of receiving one. The experiment proved a terrifying reality. Your phone is not just a neutral tool. It is a highly calibrated anxiety machine, and you're plugged directly into it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, slowly draining your peace. This is not just an abstract psychological theory. This is the reality of your daily life. Every single time you reach for your phone, the very second you wake up, before you even get out of bed, every time a sensationalist headline makes your stomach suddenly drop to the floor, every time you feel that tiny, sharp spike of panic when someone reads your message but doesn't immediately reply, you're not just standing on the sidelines watching the modern anxiety epidemic unfold. You are the modern anxiety epidemic. You're living it in real time. And the only possible way out of this trap is to deeply understand what is actually driving it. Let's pull back the curtain on reason 1, the evolutionary mismatch. As we established, your brain is a 50,000-year-old survival machine trying to navigate the year 2026. It was brilliantly constructed to handle short, intense, physical threats, running from a lion, fighting a rival tribe, or surviving a coming winter storm. Today, however, it is bombarded with hundreds of psychological micro-threats every single hour. An urgent email from your boss, a breaking news alert about a distant war, a digital notification that you desperately expected but never came. Each one of these modern stimuli triggers the exact same ancient biological alarm system in your brain. But there is no physical resolution. There is no fight. There is no flight. There is only cortisol lingering toxically in your bloodstream 24 hours a day. Reason number 2 dives deep into the invisible forces in your bedroom, the blue light that is actively hijacking your internal biological clock. For thousands of years, the human body relied on the natural setting of the sun to signal that it was finally time to rest. Darkness was the absolute biological trigger for melatonin, the hormone that allows your brain to shut down, heal, and recover from the trauma of the day. But every single night, you lie in your bed staring directly into glowing screens that pump out intense, artificial blue light. Harvard sleep researchers have definitively proven that this specific frequency of light suppresses your body's natural melatonin production far more powerfully and destructively than we ever previously imagined. But the consequences are much worse than just feeling groggy the next morning. This artificial blue light essentially tricks your primitive brain into believing that the sun is still high in the sky. It forces your delicate physiological system to remain trapped in a permanent, exhausting day mode. Because your brain thinks it is still daytime, your cortisol levels, the stress hormones, stay artificially elevated right at the exact moment they're supposed to crash to their lowest point. Your nervous system never receives the crucial biological signal that it is finally safe to stand down and relax. And so, you lie awake in the dark, tossing and turning, feeling an overwhelming wave of anxiety wash over you for absolutely no logical reason, completely unaware that you are chemically keeping yourself in a state of primal fear. Reason number 3 exposes the psychological trap sitting right in your hand, the dopamine slot machine you carry in your pocket everywhere you go. When you look at your smartphone, you probably see a convenient communication device or a harmless source of entertainment. But behavioral psychologists see something entirely different, a highly sophisticated, miniaturized casino game perfectly calibrated to exploit your brain's reward circuitry. Every single time you hear a ping, feel a vibration, or see a bright red notification, you are participating in a high-stakes psychological gamble. You physically pull the lever when you swipe down to refresh your social media feed. Sometimes you win. You get a flattering comment, a rush of likes, or an exciting text message. But most times, you lose, finding nothing but an empty screen or irrelevant updates. This unpredictable pattern of reward is known in behavioral science as intermittent reinforcement. It is the exact same psychological mechanism that multi-billion-dollar casinos use to keep gamblers glued to slot machines until they lose everything. Your brain quickly becomes conditioned to crave these tiny, unpredictable hits of dopamine. You reach for the device whenever you feel even a microsecond of boredom or discomfort. When the digital rewards inevitably slow down, your brain enters a state of panic, which feels identical to severe anxiety. You are not just addicted to your phone. You are hopelessly addicted to the unpredictable possibility of social approval, an approval that was never meant to arrive in an endless, digitized, algorithmic format. Reason number 4 explains why you can't look away from a train wreck. The vicious cycle of doom-scrolling and the deliberate exploitation of your ancient negativity bias. To understand why you consume bad news, you have to understand how your ancestors survived. They didn't stay alive by paying attention to beautiful sunsets. They survived by paying hyper-vigilant attention to threats. If an early human missed a rustle in the bushes, they died. Because of this harsh evolutionary reality, your brain is fundamentally hardwired to prioritize negative, frightening, and outrage-inducing information over everything else. Today, the world's most sophisticated algorithms know exactly how this biological loophole works. They have mapped your nervous system, and they feed you a relentless, never-ending stream of disaster, conflict, and chaos because it guarantees your attention. Clinical studies have shown that just 15 short minutes of consuming negative news, just 15 minutes of scrolling through your feed, can significantly elevate your blood pressure, spike your cortisol, and increase your baseline anxiety for hours afterward. And yet, the average person repeats this destructive loop multiple times a day without ever fully realizing what they are doing to their own biology. You scroll through wars, economic collapses, and global pandemics while sitting comfortably on your couch. Your logical mind knows you are safe, but your primitive brain genuinely believes that the apocalypse is happening right outside your front door. You are trapped in an artificial state of emergency, paying for their advertising revenue with your mental health. Reason number 5 tackles the poison of modern self-worth: social comparison on absolute steroids. For 99% of human history, social comparison was a strictly local, manageable phenomenon. You lived in a small village of maybe 150 people, and you compared your skills, attractiveness, and success to a very small, realistic pool of everyday human beings. Today, that fundamental social dynamic has been completely and utterly obliterated. You no longer compare yourself to your next-door neighbor or your coworker. moment you open Instagram, TikTok, or LinkedIn, you're instantly comparing your everyday, messy, behind-the-scenes reality to the heavily filtered, strategically highlighted, highly edited top 1% of all humanity. You are bombarded with images of 20-year-old millionaires, impossibly perfect bodies, flawless relationships, and pristine lifestyles that look like cinematic masterpieces. Psychologists at Stanford University have studied this deeply and found that this constant upward social comparison is one of the absolute strongest and most reliable predictors of clinical anxiety and depression in the modern world. The most dangerous part is how it disguises itself as harmless inspiration. You tell yourself it's motivation to hustle more and do better. But underneath the surface, it is a slow, silent poison. It fundamentally rewires your baseline expectations of what a normal, happy life is actually supposed to look like. It creates a massive, unbridgeable gap between who you are and who you feel you must be, breeding a relentless, suffocating imposter syndrome that literally never lets you rest. Reason number 6 uncovers the darkest paradox of our time, the profound loneliness epidemic that absolutely no one wants to admit. We are currently living in an era where we are supposedly more connected than any other generation in the entire history of human civilization. You can instantly video chat with someone on the other side of the planet, broadcast your thoughts to thousands of followers with a single click, and be continuously surrounded by virtual voices. Yet, despite all of this unprecedented digital infrastructure, real, deep, meaningful human friendships have completely collapsed. The United States Surgeon General recently released a major report calling loneliness a national health crisis, equating its physical damage to your body to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But why does loneliness feel so incredibly much like anxiety? To understand this, you must again look back at your ancient evolutionary programming. For early humans, isolation was a literal death sentence. If you were separated from the safety of your tribe, you lost your protection, your food, and your shelter. You became immediate prey. Therefore, your brain developed a profound biological alarm system to prevent you from being alone. When you lack genuine, face-to-face human connection, your brain lights up the exact same pain centers as if you were experiencing a physical injury. You feel it as an overwhelming, restless anxiety because your ancient nervous system genuinely believes you've been exiled into the wilderness, leaving you completely vulnerable, unprotected, and constantly bracing for an attack that you must face entirely alone. Reason number 7 reveals a medical truth that completely upends everything you thought you knew about mental health. Your gut is actively lying to your brain. For decades, the medical establishment and mainstream psychology told you that anxiety was entirely in your head, a chemical imbalance localized strictly within the confines of your skull. But modern neurogastroenterology has discovered a terrifying reality. 90% of your body's serotonin, the crucial neurotransmitter responsible for feelings of well-being and emotional stability, is actually manufactured in your gastrointestinal tract. Your gut is literally your second brain. However, the modern Western diet, packed with ultra-processed foods, refined synthetic sugars, artificial preservatives, and the rampant overuse of prescription antibiotics, has completely devastated the delicate, ancient microbiome of the average human being. You have essentially dropped a nuclear bomb on the complex ecosystem of bacteria that regulates your mood. Multiple massive, peer-reviewed studies now establish a direct, undeniable link between severe gut dysbiosis and chronic anxiety disorders. When your intestinal lining is inflamed from eating chemically altered, biologically unrecognizable food products, it sends an immediate, urgent distress signal straight up the vagus nerve to your brain. It screams that the body is under attack. So, that persistent, uncomfortable knot you feel in your stomach when you are anxious, it might not be a psychological metaphor at all. It might not be in your head. It is a literal, physical SOS signal originating from your intestines, begging for a biological environment that no longer exists in a Reason number 8 exposes an invisible, microscopic invasion that almost no one in the mainstream media is willing to talk about. Microplastics and the complete hijacking of your hormonal system. When we think of modern pollution, we usually picture massive smog clouds hanging over cities or industrial waste pouring into rivers. But the most dangerous pollution is the kind you cannot see. Microscopic fragments of plastic are now thoroughly embedded in the modern environment. Recent groundbreaking environmental health research has found these synthetic particles circulating freely in human bloodstreams, deeply lodged within our brain tissue, and even crossing the protective barrier of the placenta into unborn children. But these plastics are not just inert, harmless debris. They are known as endocrine disruptors. Once inside your body, these toxic chemicals actively mimic, block, or scramble your natural hormones. They interfere with your estrogen, your testosterone, and crucially, your thyroid and cortisol levels. You are unknowingly breathing, eating, and drinking synthetic chemical compounds that subtly but powerfully rewire your body's natural stress response. Your hormonal baseline is being artificially skewed toward panic and instability. We are currently witnessing a massive, inexplicable global rise in severe mood disorders, and a growing consensus of scientists points directly to our toxic, plastic-saturated environment. Your anxiety is not just a psychological reaction to a stressful workday. It is quite literally a chemical reaction to the synthetic materials that modern society forces you to ingest every single time you take a breath or drink a glass of water. Reason number 9 forces us to confront a fundamental biological truth. Your body was meticulously built to move, not to sit completely frozen in place. For hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, whenever your ancestors experienced stress, it was directly tied to intense, immediate physical action. When the primal brain detected a threat, it flooded the bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol for one highly specific purpose: to fuel the muscles for a violent fight or a desperate sprint for survival. Stress was designed to be physically discharged. But look at your life today. The average modern worker sits rigidly in a chair for 10, 12, or even 14 hours a day. When your boss sends a passive-aggressive email, or when your bank account balance drops too low, your primitive brain still sounds the exact same biological alarm. It pumps your veins full of high-octane survival chemicals. But because social norms dictate that you must remain seated and stare politely at your monitor, those potent stress chemicals have absolutely nowhere to go. They're never burned off. Instead, they just accumulate, silently marinating your internal organs and keeping your nervous system trapped in a state of high alert paralysis. Multiple large-scale clinical trials have proven that intense physical exercise is just as effective as heavy pharmaceutical medication for treating many forms of anxiety. When you do not move your body, you are actively denying your brain its only natural evolutionary off switch. You are trapping the panic inside yourself. Reason number 10 involves the devastating sleep debt that modern society never, ever allows you to repay. Throughout human history, adequate sleep was not considered a luxury. It was a fundamental, non-negotiable biological necessity. Today, the average person consistently gets under 7 hours of sleep per night, living in a perpetual state of exhaustion that they mistakenly believe is just the normal cost of being successful. But the medical data tells a terrifying story. Chronic sleep deprivation increases baseline anxiety by over 30%, according to massive, international large-scale studies. When you are sleep deprived, the emotional center of your brain, the amygdala, becomes up to 60% more reactive to negative stimuli. You lose the neurological capability to distinguish between a minor daily inconvenience and a genuine, life-threatening emergency. Every single minor setback feels like the end of the world. But here is the truly cruel, insidious part of this modern reality. Anxiety entirely destroys your ability to fall asleep. You are trapped in a perfect, inescapable feedback loop. The less you sleep, the more terrified and anxious your brain becomes. The more terrified you are, the more your cortisol levels spike, making it physically impossible to achieve deep, restorative sleep the following night. The modern world, with its glorification of hustle culture, endless entertainment streams, and demanding schedules, has normalized this biological torture. It has engineered a society where you are constantly too tired to cope, yet far too wired and panicked to ever truly rest. Reason number 11 reveals the deliberate, weaponized psychology of FOMO, the fear of missing out, that has been maliciously engineered directly into the apps you use every day. The bright red notification dots, the stories that permanently disappear after 24 hours, the agonizing, pulsating 3 dots that show you someone is typing. Absolutely none of these features are harmless accidents of design. They are highly sophisticated, deliberate psychological weapons crafted by some of the smartest behavioral scientists on the planet. Their sole purpose is to make you feel a deep, gnawing sense that you're constantly missing out on something vitally important happening elsewhere. To your modern, logical mind, missing a party or a digital conversation seems like a trivial annoyance. But your brain does not process FOMO logically. Your primitive brain treats the fear of missing out as a genuine, imminent social threat. Because for the vast majority of human history, being left out of the loop or being ignored by the wider tribe meant one thing: exile. And in the brutal ancestral environment, exile meant certain death by starvation or predators. When you see that you weren't invited, or when you aren't part of the viral conversation, your nervous system interprets that digital exclusion as a literal threat to your physical survival. Tech companies understand this profound biological terror perfectly, and they mercilessly exploit it to maximize their daily active users, leaving you in a state of permanent, exhausting vigilance. Reason number 12 exposes a dark, undeniable truth about the modern media landscape. Political and social polarization is no longer just a byproduct of society. It is a highly lucrative business model. Media conglomerates, cable news networks, and social media platforms do not make their billions when you feel calm, connected, and at peace with your fellow human beings. They have rigorously optimized their algorithms and editorial strategies for one specific metric: engagement. And decades of data prove that human beings engage most predictably when they are utterly terrified and violently angry. You are subjected to a constant, heavily filtered exposure of an us versus them narrative. Every headline is framed as an existential crisis. Every opposing viewpoint is framed as an act of profound evil. This deliberate, algorithmic manipulation makes the world outside your window feel permanently hostile, chaotic, and fundamentally unsafe. Even if your immediate physical surroundings are perfectly peaceful, your brain is being fed a relentless digital illusion that you are living in the middle of an active war zone, surrounded by enemies who want to destroy your way of life. Your nervous system responds exactly as it biologically should to this perceived threat environment, with a heavy, suffocating blanket of background anxiety. You are essentially being manipulated into a state of chronic panic so that advertisers can hold your attention for just a few seconds longer, turning your psychological distress into their quarterly profit. Reason number 13 is the crushing weight of endless economic precarity that never allows your mind to truly settle. In previous generations, there was a baseline illusion of stability. People had long-term careers, robust pensions, and the reasonable expectation that hard work would directly translate into a safe, comfortable life. Today, that social contract has been entirely shredded. Even if you currently hold a well-paying job, you are surrounded by the terrifying realities of the gig economy, massive corporate layoffs, and the looming, unpredictable threat of artificial intelligence replacing entire professional industries overnight. Add to that the relentless pressure of historic inflation, skyrocketing grocery prices, and housing costs that completely outpace average wages. Your primitive brain was meticulously designed by evolution to work worry primarily about securing tomorrow's resources, finding enough food to survive, and a safe shelter from the elements. In the year 2026, that deep-seated primal worry absolutely never turns off. You are acutely aware that you could be just one major medical emergency or one sudden corporate restructuring away from total financial ruin. You live with a constant, low-level dread humming in the background of your consciousness, quietly whispering that the ground beneath your feet could collapse at any given moment. This isn't irrational paranoia. It is a deeply logical response to a highly unstable, hyper-capitalist environment. Your brain simply refuses to let you relax because it knows, on a fundamental survival level, that your safety is never truly guaranteed. Reason number 14 brings us to a completely unprecedented psychological phenomenon: eco-anxiety, the new, overwhelming existential dread of our era. This is profoundly different from simply worrying about the weather or caring about recycling. Younger generations in particular are absorbing highly visceral, high-definition daily footage of apocalyptic climate disasters, massive forest fires, devastating floods, rapid species extinction, and the real-time collapse of complex global ecosystems. When you scroll through your feed and see continents burning and oceans choked with waste, you are not just consuming bad news. You are receiving a legitimate, undeniable existential threat signal that your ancient brain simply cannot ignore. For millions of years, the survival of the human animal depended entirely on the stability and health of the surrounding natural habitat. When the habitat begins to visibly collapse, the deepest, most primal parts of your neurology sound an absolute alarm. It is a biological certainty. If the environment dies, the organism dies with it. This creates a profound, paralyzing sense of powerlessness and grief. You are trapped in a terrifying paradox. You are highly aware of a massive, impending catastrophe that threatens your very existence, yet you feel completely individually powerless to stop it. This isn't a political stance or a philosophical debate. It is a raw, neurological panic attack on a species-wide level. Your brain recognizes that the foundation of life itself is cracking, generating a dark, persistent anxiety that shadows every thought about the future. Reason number 15 addresses a devastating structural change in how we live: the tragic death of third places. Sociologists use this term to describe the essential, casual public spaces where people naturally and effortlessly gather outside of their homes, which is the first place, and their workplaces, which is the second. These were the local, independent cafes, the neighborhood park benches, the corner pubs, the bustling community centers, and the church halls. These environments were the social glue of human history. But modern urban design, aggressive commercialization, and the overwhelming dominance of car-centric culture have systematically isolated us. These crucial communal spaces have either been entirely bulldozed, privatized, or made so expensive that simply existing in them requires constant spending. We now shuttle predictably between the isolation of our private apartments, the isolation of our vehicles, and the isolation of our office cubicles. Humans are deeply social primates. Our nervous systems literally co-regulate and calm down through regular, low-stakes, face-to-face contact with our wider community. A simple nod from a barista or a brief chat with a neighbor signals to the primal brain that we are safely embedded within a tribe. Without this ambient social friction, without these natural human intersections, your brain interprets the stark absence of community as a sign of extreme danger. You feel an inexplicable, creeping anxiety simply because your biology recognizes that you are entirely alone, cut off from the vital herd that is supposed to protect you. Reason number 15 addresses a devastating structural change in how we live: the tragic death of third places. Sociologists use this term to describe the essential, casual public spaces where people naturally and effortlessly gather outside of their homes, which is the first place, and their workplaces, which is the second. design, aggressive commercialization, and the overwhelming dominance of car-centric culture have systematically isolated us. These crucial communal spaces have either been entirely bulldozed, privatized, or made so expensive that simply existing in them requires constant spending. We now shuttle predictably between the isolation of our private apartments, the isolation of our vehicles, and the isolation of our office cubicles. Humans are deeply social primates. Our nervous systems literally co-regulate and calm down through regular, low-stakes, face-to-face contact with our wider community. A simple nod from a barista or a brief chat with a neighbor signals to the primal brain that we are safely embedded within a tribe. Without this ambient social friction, without these natural human intersections, your brain interprets the stark absence of community as a sign of extreme danger. You feel an inexplicable, creeping anxiety simply because your biology recognizes that you are entirely alone, cut off from the vital herd that is supposed to protect you. Reason number 17 dives into the complete and total collapse of the boundary between your professional obligations and your personal life. For previous generations, work was a physical place you went to. You clocked in, you did your job, and at 5 o'clock, you physically left the building. The work stayed at the factory or the office. But today, because of the supercomputer in your pocket, the office literally follows you everywhere you go. It sits with you at the dinner table, it rides with you on your commute, and it rests on your nightstand while you try to sleep. We have created a toxic, always-on work culture where you are expected to be perpetually available. You receive demanding emails at 10 o'clock at night. Your phone vibrates with Slack pings while you are supposedly relaxing on vacation. Your nervous system is constantly bracing for the next arbitrary emergency from a manager or client. Because the boundary has completely dissolved, your brain never, ever receives the definitive psychological signal that it is officially allowed to stand down and recover. You're held hostage by the expectation of immediate responsiveness. Chronic, low-level work anxiety has silently become the default state of existence for millions of people. You feel guilty when you're resting, and you feel exhausted when you're working. Your body is stuck in a perpetual twilight zone of stress, constantly anticipating a digital tap on the shoulder that demands your immediate attention and energy, leaving you drained and fundamentally on edge. Reason number 18 confronts a terrifying biological bottleneck, the sheer, crushing volume of information overload that is actively breaking your cognitive limits. The human brain is an absolute marvel of evolution, but it is not a limitless supercomputer. Your cerebral cortex has a very specific, biologically determined capacity for meaningfully processing information on any given day. To put this into perspective, modern neuroscientists estimate that the average person today consumes vastly more raw data, opinions, facts, and images in a single 24-hour period than our ancient ancestors consumed in their entire lifetimes. You are bombarded with endless social media feeds, thousands of advertising messages, dozens of newsletters, hundreds of text messages, and an infinite scroll of varied, contradictory content. This relentless avalanche of data completely overwhelms your brain's natural filtration system. It creates a severe phenomenon known as decision fatigue, when your mind is forced to process so much conflicting information and make hundreds of micro-decisions every hour. It simply runs out of metabolic energy. This profound mental exhaustion does not just manifest as tiredness. It manifests as a deep, paralyzing anxiety. Your overwhelmed brain throws up its hands and triggers a panic response because it can no longer safely predict or navigate the environment. You feel entirely lost in a sea of noise, unable to focus, unable to remember simple things, and consumed by a persistent feeling that you are drowning in a flood of digital information that you can never possibly hope to control. Reason number 19 explores the silent erosion of your self-trust, the profound loss of agency, and the outsourcing of real-world survival skills. Think about how much of your daily life is now completely controlled and directed by algorithmic applications. You no longer need to know how to navigate your own city. GPS tells you exactly where to turn. You no longer need to remember phone numbers, birthdays, or important dates. The cloud remembers them for you. You do not even need to know how to choose a restaurant, a movie, or a romantic partner, because predictive algorithms serve up exactly what they think you want. On the surface, this looks like unprecedented convenience and luxury. But beneath the surface is actively destroying your psychological resilience. Confidence and a sense of internal safety come directly from a feeling of competence, the quiet, deeply rooted knowledge that you can handle whatever the world throws at you. When an app does absolutely everything for you, your brain realizes that you are becoming fundamentally helpless. Less personal agency mathematically equals more anxiety. Deep down in your subconscious, your primitive survival brain knows that if the grid goes down, if the battery dies, or if a system fails, you are entirely vulnerable. You feel a creeping existential anxiety because you have traded your autonomy for convenience, and your nervous system is sounding the alarm that you are entirely dependent on a fragile digital infrastructure to survive your own life. Reason number 20 addresses the devastating psychological toll of carrying the weight of the entire world in your pocket. For the vast majority of human history, tragedy was a localized event. If something terrible happened in your village, you dealt with it. But you were completely shielded from the suffering of people on the other side of the planet. Today, that protective buffer has been violently stripped away. Pandemics, brutal wars, mass shootings, devastating economic collapses, and catastrophic natural disasters are now live-streamed directly into the palm of your hand in high definition, 24 hours a day. You are witnessing raw, unfiltered human suffering on a global scale, usually while sitting alone in your living room or lying in bed. This constant exposure creates a very real psychological condition known as vicarious trauma. Your brain's mirror neurons, the empathy engines of your mind, cannot easily distinguish between suffering that you witness on a glowing screen and suffering that is happening directly in front of you. You are absorbing the emotional shockwaves of global tragedies without any physical time, space, or communal support to meaningfully process them. Your nervous system reacts exactly as if these horrific events are happening to you personally, because on a neurobiological level, they are. Your brain is overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of planetary grief and danger, leaving you trapped in a state of chronic, helpless anxiety about a world that appears to be permanently on fire. Reason number 21 exposes the suffocating grip of the modern perfectionism industrial complex. We have built a society at the exact intersection of highly filtered social media and relentless, hyper-capitalist hustle culture. In this environment, the concept of simply being good enough has been completely assassinated. Every single aspect of your human existence must now be relentlessly optimized, aesthetically pleasing, and visibly successful to the outside world. You cannot just eat breakfast. You must have an optimized, photogenic morning routine. You cannot just have a hobby. It must be monetized into a profitable side hustle. You cannot just go to the gym. You must be tracking your macros and posting your progress. This creates a deeply toxic environment where failure, or even just being painfully average, feels completely catastrophic. The margin for error in the modern mind has shrunk to zero. This impossible, synthetic standard of living is a direct, highly efficient anxiety factory. You spend your days terrified of making a mistake, terrified of looking foolish, and terrified of falling behind your peers who seem to be effortlessly mastering this impossible game. Your self-worth becomes entirely contingent on external validation and productivity metrics. You are running on an endless, exhausting treadmill, chasing a mirage of perfection that does not actually exist, and the fear of stumbling is what keeps your chest permanently tight with anxiety. Reason number 22 targets the invisible stressor that you are swimming in every day. Constant acoustic noise and relentless sensory overload. modern urban environment is exponentially louder and more visually chaotic than at any other point in the history of our species. We are surrounded by the wail of sirens, the aggressive rumble of heavy traffic, the hum of massive air conditioning units, the aggressive glare of LED billboards, and the constant, overlapping chatter of crowded spaces. You might think you have simply gotten used to it, that you can effectively tune it out, but your mammalian brain absolutely never tunes it out. Even moderate, continuous background noise has been clinically proven to significantly raise baseline cortisol and adrenaline levels. In the wild, sudden, or continuous low-frequency noise usually meant one of two things: an approaching storm or an approaching predator. Your nervous system is constantly, subconsciously scanning this chaotic environment for immediate threats, expending massive amounts of metabolic energy just to process the sheer volume of sensory input. Your brain is essentially operating in a hostile environment that never, ever goes quiet. This chronic sensory bombardment fries your nerve endings and exhausts your psychological reserves. You feel anxious and irritable, not because of any specific emotional problem, but simply because your biological hardware is overheating from the relentless friction of existing in a modern, hyperstimulated world. Reason number 23 forces us to look at what is missing: the profound psychological damage caused by nature deficit disorder. Human beings did not evolve in sterile, concrete boxes bathed in fluorescent lighting. We are intimately, biologically wired for deep immersion in the natural world. Our eyes evolved to process the complex fractal patterns of leaves and branches. Our ears evolved to find the sounds of running water and wind deeply soothing. Yet, the average modern human now spends less than 10% of their entire life outdoors. We have completely severed our connection to the environment that built us. Pioneering researchers like Richard Love, along with hundreds of peer-reviewed environmental psychology studies, have demonstrated that this severe nature deficit directly and aggressively increases the rates of clinical anxiety, depression, and attention disorders. When you're trapped indoors for days on end, staring at harsh geometric angles and artificial screens, your biology registers that something is fundamentally wrong. You are quite literally starving for a specific sensory input that your DNA explicitly expects and requires to regulate your nervous system. That tight, suffocating feeling you get in your chest isn't just stress from your inbox. It is the physical manifestation of an animal that has been placed in an artificial enclosure, desperately yearning to walk on soft earth and breathe unfiltered air. You are disconnected from your source. Reason number 24 uncovers a terrifying biological mechanism: hidden systemic chronic inflammation bridging the gap between your body and your mind. We used to think that mental health and physical health were entirely separate domains, but modern immunology has completely destroyed that myth. The modern lifestyle, characterized by eating ultra-processed, chemical-laden foods, breathing heavily polluted city air, suffering from chronic sleep deprivation, and enduring relentless psychological stress, creates a state of low-grade, constant inflammation throughout your entire body. Your immune system is permanently activated, fighting an invisible enemy. But here is the critical breakthrough in neuroscience. This bodily inflammation actually crosses the blood-brain barrier. When your brain becomes inflamed, it produces a well-documented biological response known as sickness behavior. Think about how you feel when you have a severe flu. You feel deeply fatigued, you want to withdraw from social contact, you feel highly pessimistic, and you feel profoundly anxious. That is exactly what chronic inflammation does to your mind on a daily basis, just at a slightly lower, more insidious volume. You are seeking therapy to figure out why you feel so incredibly anxious and unmotivated, without realizing that your body genuinely believes is fighting off a massive, never-ending biological infection. Your anxiety is a physiological symptom of a modern lifestyle that is keeping your immune system trapped in a permanent state of fiery, exhausting war reason number 25 is the ultimate culmination of all these hidden forces, the deliberate, systematic, and industrial scale exploitation of your negativity bias. Every single digital platform you use, every major news outlet you read, and every corporate advertiser targeting you has rigorously optimized their entire business model for one thing: engagement. And the hard, cold data of human psychology dictates that engagement heavily favors fear, outrage, paranoia, and deep-seated anxiety. Your ancient negativity bias, the exact evolutionary mechanism that kept your ancestors alive by making them hyper-focused on threats, is now being actively weaponized against you. You are not the customer in this digital economy. Your attention is the product being harvested and sold to the highest bidder. And the undeniable truth of the modern media landscape is that anxiety sells better than absolutely anything else. Calm, contented people do not scroll for 6 hours a day. Happy people do not impulse buy products they don't need to fill an emotional void. People who feel secure in their communities are not easily manipulated by terrifying political rhetoric. The system requires your psychological destabilization to function at its peak profitability. You are living inside a massive, invisible machine that constantly feeds you the precise emotional triggers required to keep you off balance, afraid, and endlessly consuming. Your panic is not a byproduct. It is the intended outcome of their design. These 25 hidden reasons do not work in isolation. They stack, multiply, and form a suffocating web around your daily life. The average person is hit by at least 15 of these invisible forces every single day, from the moment their alarm goes off until they finally collapse into bed. No wonder anxiety feels completely normal now. But listen carefully, it was never supposed to be this way. If you do not actively strive to understand these forces, they will continue controlling you for the rest of your life. They will keep you endlessly scrolling, mindlessly consuming, and quietly obeying a system that does not care about you. The modern world simply does not need you to be calm. It needs you to be just anxious enough to keep participating in the machine. But now you see the strings. Anxiety is no longer the invisible enemy. It is a biological messenger jammed by the deafening static of modern life. The real threat is the quiet, highly profitable war being waged on your attention, your peace, and your nervous system. You cannot delete the modern world, but you can stop being its passive victim. Start noticing when that heavy knot appears in your chest. Notice which of these 25 forces is pulling your string. Awareness is the first cut of the leash. Your ancient brain was meant to protect you from immediate danger, and then, crucially, let you rest. It is time to ruthlessly take back your peace. Which of these 25 hidden reasons hit you the hardest? Drop the number in the comments below. I read every single one. If this video opened your eyes, hit like and subscribe. Next week, we go even deeper into the dark psychology used to control your mind without you ever realizing it. Until then, stay curious, stay aware, and protect your peace like your life depends on it. Because it does. See you in the next one.